Hi, you're watching The Tattooed Psychic. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am very excited today because this is kind of a funny story. I started this podcast just recently. After COVID, I had to quit my other podcast and now I'm doing this one. But on this podcast, I really wanted to bring in some healers. And I was really looking for a doctor of natural medicine, somebody who could teach us about natural medicine. And because that's something I know nothing about. I know a lot about spirit, but not a lot about my body and how it works. And to make a long story short, a month had gone by, but I kept seeing little Savannah running around and with her little yoga mat, and she was just always just positive energy. And one day we happened to be in the same area, and I was cleaning, and Spirit said to me, "You know that she's a healer, and she's a doctor of medicine." And I said, "Really? Huh?" And then I said, and they said, "You should ask her." And I said, "Okay." And I just kind of looked at her and said, "So you're a healer, huh?"
That's exactly what you said.
Did you know? And then the rest is history. But
Yeah.
it's funny how Spirit put you in my path at the same time. So here we are, and this is my guest today, Dr. Savannah. Yay!
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with you. Was thrilled that you invited me on, and I'm grateful for just us meeting and having the chance to talk more about how to heal.
Yes, and I'm just honored you're here because I read your website and I look at your videos and I follow you on Instagram. And I'm going to get emotional here in a minute because I get emotional. You'll find that out. But I just think you're amazing. And the way your compassion towards your work and your compassion towards your clients is so refreshing to see in a world, in a field really that's just rife with posers and people who just do it so they can call themselves a healer.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see you and read your website and read your clients' responses, they're just you just change lives, and that's what I'm about. You don't just go, "Oh, take this herb and drink this tea." You're like, "No, let's find out what works for you in your body," and that's what we want to talk about today, right?
Yeah, that is a passion of mine, and
Yeah,
thank you for seeing that.
yeah. Oh, it's
Yeah.
definitely seen if people have eyes.
You have more eyes than two.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk today about it was interesting you brought up a subject yesterday about people who are spiritual and they don't really connect with their bodies.
Yes.
And that is me,
Yeah,
100%.
you
I
were
was
like, oh,
laughing. Yeah, I was like, it's me.
yeah.
I've always had a disconnect with the food I intake and the body. I was a vegan for a while when I was pregnant with my son. That's a
Hmm.
different story. But I've never been able to pay attention to my body. So talk to me about that.
Well, to start, I'm trained in a modality called NARM, and it's a psychotherapy technique that I use to help people recover from complex trauma. And so, just at a foundational level, I want to acknowledge that disconnecting from the body is actually a strategy that a lot of us use to survive, uh,
Yes.
to cope with the stressors and at times the overwhelming stressors. Yeah. And I know parts of your story, and that was probably a really helpful, um, really adaptive strategy that you learned to disconnect from certain sensations, certain emotions, certain cues that your body would give you, or even to just kind of dissociate altogether. It's really common for people who have a more spiritual leaning in this life to kind of bypass the body and go toward the mental, emotional, energetic realms to connect there and disconnect here, because what's here and now has been historically unsafe or threatening or just too painful. So that's what I want to start with is teaching your audience and just acknowledging in this space that disconnecting from the body isn't necessarily bad. It's served you in immense ways, and we can start to take the steps to reconnect, because we know that the reconnection is where the healing happens.
Right. That's interesting you say that. I've had a huge disconnect with my body my entire life because my body was abused and used, honestly. And I
Yeah.
started to hate my body for that reason.
Yeah.
I also grew up in the 70s where the people weren't really health conscious, and our diet was meat and potatoes. And food to me, honestly, was comfort. And I've always been overweight. I've always had a curvy figure, but it is because when I was a child, the only comfort I got was that pleasure of the taste in the mouth, the food. But I disconnected from my body. And I tell people when I got tattooed, I'm covered in tattoos. That was the only time I felt my body was when that I was having that process of getting tattooed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand that disconnect of the body. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious about it, just in your journey, ways that you have connected with your body in ways that has been life-giving, or feeling good and letting yourself connect.
I'm a crazy adrenaline junkie. Doing exciting things connects me to my body. Like just recently I went to the Oregon coast and did a ritual ceremony on the edge of a cliff, and it was extremely windy and I could have fell at any moment, but I felt my body at that time like we're on this journey and it could end any second, but it's very exciting. So I kind of like the tattoos. That's what I'm saying is that's what gave me that stimulation with my body. I've always been ashamed of my body, and because I felt like because of my body, it allowed that abuse to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, as kids, when we're growing up in a very unpredictable environment, especially when there are really traumatic stressors, potentially actually dangerous stressors, when things happen, our brains are not developed enough to understand that doesn't have to do with us. We internalize everything as kids. We personalize everything. We're just more egoic. That's just how we are as kids, because our brains haven't developed to hold complex realities yet. So when something bad happens, we immediately believe that it is our fault. If parents get divorced, mom and dad separate, my fault. If someone dies, my fault. If someone gets sick, if someone abuses me, my fault. So we disconnect from our body as a source of comfort because we learn to believe that it's bad and it's the source of the shame. So it makes sense hearing some of the strategies you've used to reconnect. When you have that shame around your body.
So how do I change that, Dr. Savannah? Because many people have this, right? And I want so bad to love my body and give the right nutrients inside my body and treat it the way it actually deserves to be treated, instead of the way I was programmed to treat it. I've done a lot of healing on the trauma aspect of my life, the abuse and all that. Now I have to work on the body part of it because that's the next step, really.
Right.
So it can all sync together, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of us have a hard time with that.
Yeah. Yeah. You are not alone. We all have created ways of disconnecting from ourselves to cope to a larger or lesser degree. All of us have. So this is a universal experience.
Right.
Something you said kind of piqued my interest. You said that when you do things that spark adrenaline, that's one way that you feel connected. And what is it that I'm curious what it is that you feel, or what it is that does for you when you have that.
I feel alive. It's a sense of awareness and aliveness, like I'm living. It makes me aware that I am alive and not just existing, not just floating around, but when I have that adrenaline of like my next goal is to jump out of an airplane. I want that adrenaline. I want that excitement to make me feel alive. That's how I feel alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you aware of the polyvagal theory?
No.
Heard of this? So this is a pretty well-developed theory in the field of neurobiology. And to explain it simply, our nervous system has different parts that have different functions. So a lot of people have heard of the fight or flight system, sympathetic nervous system. That's the adrenaline feeling that you have. That's your fight or flight nervous system. It's the primary response that our bodies will use to defend and fight and run away to escape danger or fight off danger. And when we are young and in a threatening environment, it's really, really common for us to cut ourselves off from that life force energy. Maybe there was a moment where you got angry and then your caregiver reprimanded you or hurt you or something like that. Maybe the moments that you felt connected to your life force energy were then the moments that you felt most disappointed or heartbroken. And so there are different reasons why we will then disconnect from that ability to, we call it mobilize, the mobilization of our body's resources, our energy, our muscles. That adrenaline rush gives us all this energy. And for those who've experienced early trauma, there is often just kind of wired into the nervous system this default mode of not connecting to that energy as readily. So it makes me think of this polyvagal theory where when you're doing adrenaline inducing activities, you're allowing yourself to connect to that life force that you probably felt you had to disconnect from when you were young. And when we disconnect from that life force energy, we will sometimes be more predominant in the other side of the nervous system, called the parasympathetic system. So that's the rest and digest nervous system. And the sympathetic and the parasympathetic are always in a balance within the body. They're never one is on and one is off. They're balanced. But when we get stressed or anxious, or there's a deadline coming up, we have that sympathetic energy go up. And then when the stressor goes away, the sympathetic comes back down, and then we're able to go back into more relaxed state. There's another part of this parasympathetic system that is actually in charge of the freeze response or the collapse response. So when we're feeling threatened or the stressor is overwhelming and we have this fight or flight, and we realize that it's either not going to get us to safety or it's actually putting us in more danger, our body will switch and go into a specific type of parasympathetic response called the freeze, called the dorsal vagal response. And this is where depression tends to come in, where the life force energy is dimmed because connecting to it, we learned, was dangerous. So when that dorsal vagal response is predominant, we can go through life feeling a little bit disconnected, dissociated, numb, lack of motivation, lack of focus. Our digestive system can be sluggish. Our immune system can be low. It's almost like there's the fuse that connects our life force energy is flipped, or the fuse is broken, right? So those moments where you go to adrenaline seeking activities are like, it like resets your fuse, like you kind of like reconnect, re-spark.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just curious how all that lands. I just talked a lot, kind of the neurobiology lens, but what's going through your mind hearing that perspective on things?
That you're nailing me. You're nailing me, because that's everything. It makes sense on, I know I'm a spiritualist, right? And I believe in the woo-woo stuff, whatever anybody wants to call it. But I'm also a science brain. And I have to have things make sense.
Mm-hmm.
even when I communicate with people passed on, I studied that long enough to where it made sense to me, like why I could do it, like how it happens, that type of thing. And this is fascinating information to me because I'm like, this makes sense to me and why I react the way I do and why my body reacts the way it does because of that damn childhood trauma, because of everything I was taught, you know, and it just lingers with us.
Mm-hmm.
And but we can change this, right? We can change these
Yes.
behaviors.
Yes. Yes. They are.
Instead of being self-destructive, it can be productive.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can work with them. We can learn how to kind of mold them and shift and rewire. And it takes time, but it is very much possible. I'm curious to ask you, when you do something that gives you adrenaline, and this is me fishing. I'm seeing if I just have a theory. So tell me if this is a yes or a no. You do this adrenaline activity and you feel alive and it feels really good. What happens next, either later that day or the next day or in the next week?
I honestly, I get a sense of sadness. Like I go into a like, how do I word it? Another way I feel alive is when I give a reading though. And I'm jiving with that person and my adrenaline's going and I'm like, yeah, and it feels so good. So after that, I usually feel a sense of like that moment happened. It was really exciting. And then I get kind of down for a couple of days, to be honest, like, oh, now what? I guess it would be kind of like a drug habit. I would assume that you get that really high moment and then you're falling down and going, I want to catch that again.
Yeah. So I can explain from this biological perspective what could be happening there. So our nervous systems and all of nature really are in this continuous cycle of expansion and contraction. And from this perspective, I consider expansion to be a state of I'm connecting to myself. I'm connecting to my aliveness and my life force energy. And when you're giving a reading, when you're going skydiving, that's a state of expansion. And just like after a breath in, what has to come next? A breath out. Mm-hmm. So naturally, after we expand outward and feel more and more aliveness, a greater state of connectedness, we will always have a time of exhale, of coming back in. Now, for those of us for people who've experienced early trauma, developmental, relational, attachment trauma, complex trauma of some sort, too much expansion too quickly, all at once, often leads to an even bigger contraction. So you have a high, you have a really good day, you have a really expansive experience, and then the next week, or it snowballs into a prolonged state, you feel low and depressed. And there are reasons why it can prolong, and we could talk about that too. But in the work that I do with clients, I'm very careful to explain how this happens and to not go too fast into the expansion, and to let the client know that after this feel-good connectedness, how do you want to treat yourself when you notice you're coming back in? Because that coming back in is going to happen, especially if we find ourselves expanding really fast and really big and have a big sympathetic response after. If we think about just the natural flow of a stress response as humans, if we could even think back to like thousands of years ago, before modern society, when we didn't have all this distraction and the stressors that we have, we were living in tribes, in groups of people and families, and we would be at rest unless we were going out to hunt or going out to gather. We would mobilize energy and our stress response so that we could defend against predators and get everything we needed. And then when we come back together, the stress response comes down. So we mobilize, sympathetic response, and then we bring the mobilization down back to baseline. And that's where we recover. In our modern society, we don't always give ourselves time to recover after a big mobilization. And also, we keep mobilizing and mobilizing. We're in this prolonged stress response where we're asking so much of our bodies and our minds to produce and achieve, and it's an unnatural state. And so after that, we naturally come back down and we go down even further, and we need a lot of time to recover. So I just wanted to describe that ebb and flow, because those seems like that could be part of what's happening for you.
Well, I would like to ask you something, because you talk about that high and then that low. Now, and we can answer this very briefly, would you equivalent that to bipolarism?
That's a good question. So there, with bipolar disorder, there is a really prolonged high, days, weeks, or longer, and then a prolonged low. So the cycles of this, we could call it activation energy or mobilization energy, are much longer and much more severe. Not to get too into the weeds on that, but it is a similar type of cycle.
Because that's what it sounded like.
Expending lots of energy, and then naturally, because it's just the flow of nature within us, what comes up must come down, needs time to recover, replenish, rejuvenate. So it's a similar type of cycle.
Right. And can I tell you something though? I will say this, that since I've done a certain type of healing, and in the past 9 months actually, and really worked on that subconscious mind and the cellular work, I don't find myself being that depressed anymore. I don't find those lows being as common as they were for almost 50 years. A lot older than you, but yeah, so I'm 57 years old now, and I just figured this out of how, I've learned a lot about my trauma, honestly, and how it affects my body, my mind, my relationships, and how I feel about myself. And I'm not, honestly, I've been suicidal my whole life, to keep it honest. But since I've done this certain type of work, I haven't felt it. And I feel like sometimes we have to go, and I want you to answer this, because with the body, do you feel that we do have to hit the subconscious mind sometimes as well to understand our body more? Does that make sense?
Explain again, when you say subconscious mind, what exactly you mean when
the subconscious mind, meaning how I was programmed to treat myself, how I was programmed to feel in the world, how as a child that you're programmed, in your childhood, that stays in your subconscious mind, even though as an adult, you're not in that same situation. Your mother's not abusing you anymore. You're not in foster homes anymore.
Yeah.
It's in that it's right back here always.
Yeah.
And it's about going in there and going, no, you can't stay there anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes. Most of our behaviors and our thoughts and everything we do on a daily basis is subconscious. So there's most of the work is about getting to the subconscious mind. And a lot of times there are unresolved feelings and distorted beliefs that are leading our life and leading our behaviors that we don't even recognize. So a lot of times,
that's what I mean.
Yeah. A lot of times when I'm with a client, most of what I'm doing is simply mirroring back to them what they're saying, that they just kind of take it as truth, and they're not realizing what they're actually saying, or what it is that they're the belief that's underneath that. Right. And the potential, the feelings that they were never able to feel, going along with the beliefs and the stories that they endured. So yes, my answer is yes. The subconscious is a big part of that.
Right. And this is something interesting that maybe you can shed some light on, because I know you're so wise on this stuff that I've never told anyone this before. But
Okay.
and I want somebody said shed some light, because
Let's do it.
this is just coming out of nowhere, and I never thought I would bring this up.
Okay, let's
The
go for it.
Spirit saying, just do it, Faye. You're learning how to be yourself. So I have this fear, and I don't know where it comes from,
Mhm.
of, how do I word it? My relationship with my body is interesting, because I have this fear that my body is going to be too skinny.
Hmm.
What is that? Like, I have this fear, like,
Hmm.
I can't explain it. Like, I'm not afraid of being too skinny. I would actually enjoy being skinny once in my life, but I can't explain it. It comes from within. It's
Yes.
like, and I don't know if it's a past life energy. Maybe I got starved to death or something, but it's this like, oh, I have to overeat.
Huh?
I don't, I'm sorry, the words that instantly came out was to protect myself.
Yeah.
What is that?
That was my next question. What, um, the fear of being too skinny, how might that, if we go with it, it sounds, the logical mind says, well, I'm not actually afraid of that, but there's something in your body that's a true thing. So if we go with that place that really feels this and ask that place within you, how could that help you? That having that fear, how is that a good thing?
No.
Well, if we go with the thread that every emotion that we have comes from some place of truth, everything we're afraid of is its intent is to, whenever fear comes up, it's trying to protect us. So if we go with that, because we know, again, logically, you're not actually afraid of being too skinny,
Right.
but there is a place within you. There's some part of your body, some part of your soul that says, I'm afraid of this. So if we go with that place, what is she afraid might happen? And how would not being skinny be protective?
Honestly, I think you're just waking me up here, because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm trying to get to the core of why I think that way. And honestly, it stems from being raped and molested as a child. I feel like and this this is not how I feel at all,
Huh?
but I feel like in society, more skinny women are revered, more beautiful,
Yeah. Yeah.
more attractive. I'm getting emotional about it, but
Yeah.
I feel like if I'm too skinny and too beautiful, I'll get hurt. Is that bizarre?
That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not bizarre. That sounds like a really good survival strategy.
Survivor's my middle name for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't
As
mean to get so deep, but yeah, I think that it is that, because I'm trying to get to the core of why we, especially trauma survivors, why we just abuse our bodies so much. It's just so unhealthy to hate our bodies the way we do, or dislike them. Hate's such a strong word for me, but to not feel comfortable or to not feel beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm hearing from you is this fear living within your body of being skinny. And you mentioned overeating as you were talking about this fear. So I'm curious if there's a connection between this fear that you just brought up and the ways that you abuse your body.
Yeah, I think so. There has to be.
And this is such tender territory. So you can answer how it feels good for you, and we can redirect. Is there an example of some kind of middle of the line way that you would say feels abusive, that you do to yourself, whether it's overeating or something, that we could use in it as an example?
Like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, I'll get up in the middle of the night and eat something, even if I'm not hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great example. Does that to you feel like self-abuse?
Yes,
That does.
because I know it's not right. As I'm doing it, I know it's wrong
Mm-hmm.
because it's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for me. And I know that, consciously aware of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and now, honestly, the past couple of weeks, I have been paying more attention to what my body says and have been juicing more.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really proud of that because I'm actually like, oh, my body wants carrots, kale. It's talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you're just really healing me right now because maybe it's a fear of being happy.
Ah.
Maybe it's a fear of like, wow, my life I'm healing the trauma. I feel really great about myself as far as that goes. I broke my addiction to, drugs and alcohol. I'm feeling good about that. But it's now I'm just going to abuse my body, I guess, because I'm used to abuse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, what if I'm too happy and healthy?
Yeah. What if? Let's go with that line of reasoning. What scary, bad, painful, etc. thing could happen to you if you got too happy?
People taking advantage of me. Yeah.
That's a real fear that you learned growing up. Don't get too happy because bad things might happen.
Yeah. And a lot of people have that.
Yeah.
I know I'm not the only woman who has this disconnect with her body by any means. And I know beautiful, in shape women who have disconnect with their bodies. And I'm like, why? Like, you're
Yeah, it
amazing.
does not discriminate size, shape, color.
Right. It doesn't.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation. So let's talk about some tips. Give us some tips that we can just start at basic ground zero to connect,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
to maybe start to change this relationship with the body and the self.
Mm-hmm.
What do
Well,
you think?
we could start in this moment if you're open.
I'm told, honey, I'm always open to change. That's
Good,
one
good.
thing about life I love so much is that we can change at any time we want.
So true. Yeah. My first my number one is consent. So I always ask first
I
before
love that. Yeah.
diving into something. So in this moment we have a chance to change, if you will. In this moment, we could connect with our bodies in a new way. So I'm curious if you give yourself a couple of moments to turn some of your awareness inward to your own internal experience right now, what you notice and how it is to be invited to even notice. So I'll give you a couple moments and just let me know how that invitation lands for you.
Well, the first word that comes to my mind and the feeling I get in this present moment is hopeful.
Oh. Hmm.
I feel very hopeful.
Hmm. Can I ask where you are experiencing that hopefulness?
Right in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can, give yourself, if you can slow down on that feeling and kind of linger with it for a couple moments, noticing that hopefulness, where it's emerging from, and what happens when you give it some space.
People at home do this as well. Sit with yourself and do exactly what we're doing, but use your own words. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. The hopefulness I feel is that feeling is expanding, and I feel almost giggly when it stands out. When it starts here, I get excited and I feel a little nervous and afraid, right? Like a little kid going into the water for the first time.
Mhm.
I want to do it, but I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
Then as soon as I lift that from this area and allow it to expand into its form how it wants, I just told that hope energy, just go where you want to. It went into a giggly phase of a child just feeling free and happy, not
Mm.
having that burden. Just, I can't explain it, but it's a giggly feeling.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a process that we'll sometimes call disidentification, where to put it simply, our old wiring and belief systems start to kind of uh, unwire, disengage so that new ones can come in and start forming. And when that happens, all kinds of different responses can emerge. We can take a big breath out. We can like see something in the room we didn't even realize was there. We can have emotions bubble up, and it seems like there's something that kind of just shifted for you in that moment.
Yes, it did. You know, I'm a very sensitive person. I have to be in the work that I do, and I'm very passionate about life and being the best I can be in this life. And I know I'm fucked up because of my childhood and the things I survived, but at the same time, this feeling I have, you know, this hopefulness and stuff is very strong. And
Mm,
I'm very determined to go forward with that,
mm,
not go back. And I think that that's where I'm at right now in life is you were talking about everything, you know, the balance of those
yes.
two. But I feel like right now I'm more, I'm unbalanced in the physical world and the body.
Mm,
I'm really balanced in spirit,
mhm,
but I'm not balanced here. And
mhm,
when I get that hopeful feeling, it's scary at first, but then I'm at this point where, you know, sometimes in life, you don't have any other choice to, but to take a chance on yourself when nobody else will. I hope that makes sense.
mhm.
That's where I'm at now.
Yeah. It seems like this hopefulness is for you is a sort of expansion. And instead of it being an adrenaline activity size expansion where you're likely to coil back in because it's so much aliveness and it's scary for your nervous system, um, it feels more sustainable. It feels like a connection to your life force that I could hear there's a little bit of nervousness, like your body's like, is this safe? And you're saying, yes, it's safe. You can open up. And instead of launching yourself into this adrenaline state, you're moving into a connection that is very mindful and present. And that's so beautiful to watch.
And I want to not hate my body anymore. And I think this is
Mm,
so interesting because you're really sitting talking with you. Is I hope other people are getting this too. It's a great epiphany for me because as you're talking to me, a voice is you know inside of me is saying, you know, Faye, you're hating your body right now because you're happy in the rest of your life. And see, this is the pattern we have, right?
mm,
Is that we are taught to hate ourselves, children who are abused. That's just a given. You don't love, you know, if your own parents don't love you, come on. My own mother didn't love me. How do you think I felt when the person who gave you life doesn't even want you? That's intense. And it's almost like I'm hanging on to the dislike of my body and wanting to hurt it more because I don't have that abuse anymore. And you're used to it. Does that make sense? And I don't have anyone in my life abusing me. anymore. I'm
Yeah.
single. I've been alone for a long time. So I'm abusing myself now. Oh my God, I'm having this epiphany. Do you
You're
see
just
what I'm
noticing this.
saying?
Yeah.
I'm abusing my own body now
Mm-hmm.
and not wanting to.
Mm-hmm. From a perspective of survival,
Yeah.
can you take a guess on why the abuse might make sense?
Because it's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. And when you heal from trauma, as you know, you discover a new world and you learn new things about the world and yourself and what you like and don't like,
Mm-hmm.
the new self, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one reason I wanted to connect with you and bring you on to the podcast, was because I wanted you to teach people who have been through trauma and been through the things that I have, and not everyone has, and some people have been through worse, that we're not victims of this, that we are survivors of this.
Yeah.
And our body is important. It's what's carrying our spirit. It's what's carrying our life, and
Yeah.
we should treat it with love and respect.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And you do that so well with your own self. I see that. And with your clients, like I said, I read your website, I watch your Instagram, and you're so passionate about it. And I want that.
Mm. You're moving toward it.
Yeah, I want that.
Toward it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
And other people want that.
Yeah.
Other people want to get up and have the discipline that you have, to treat your body good, to go do yoga. You teach yoga.
Mm-hmm.
You make fire cider. I saw that.
Yeah.
You've got this well-fed woman program going on. You're just constantly aware of that. And I think many people want that as well. They want that discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So I cry like for no reason, like I'm just tears come down. Yeah.
I love that about you.
Yeah, that's what everyone says. It's just who I am. It's just, well, I cry when I see someone so beautiful like you. So, I'm a medium, right? So I deal with death all the time. I deal with sadness continually. I'm a death doula, so I see people die. They die in my arms, and then I deal with their families afterwards. And the number one thing I think my goal is to get people to live. And I felt dead most of my life, not living. And that's probably why I like the adrenaline. And that's why I like those things and getting tattooed, because it does make me feel alive. Yeah. And this connection with the body is so important, I think, because it's been so neglected for so long. Mm-hmm. And I'm so passionate right now to, today I was looking up bone broth. What can I do to trigger this body into feeling good and not being afraid to lose 20 pounds instead of gain 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have a whole series of podcasts brewing now, because I have so many directions I want to spin off from where we are right now.
That's why I love you, because you know so much. Your knowledge is so valuable. And just like my knowledge as a medium is valuable to certain people, right? To want to learn that. Your knowledge is valuable to women and to men, I'm sure. And I'm not a man, so I can't speak on a male perspective, but as a female perspective, I know how women are treated with their bodies. But your knowledge is valuable, and so I guess the quick question would be is, what is someone's first step has been working on their trauma to help reconnect with the body, to be aware of the body?
That's a great question. I'll probably have a couple answers as they just kind of percolate. What's the best first step to reconnect?
Besides getting a tattoo, I mean.
Yeah. So everyone's different. Everyone has disconnected for different reasons. So the invitations I'll offer might work for one person and not for the next.
Spirit work, yeah.
But one place to start is with our food. So we all eat every day, multiple times a day, and oftentimes it's in a state of partial unconsciousness. We're watching TV, we're reading a book, we're on the phone, we're FaceTiming, whatever it might be, or we're just scrolling because we're used to eating in a state of disconnection. So invitation number one would be to be with your food as you're eating and to allow yourself to enjoy your food, to use all of your senses. From the time you have the thought, it's time to cook, smell the food, look at the textures, hear the sizzling. That's what starts the digestive juices flowing. Actually, it's called the cephalic phase of eating. Before you even start eating, your digestion process begins when you're engaging with your food. So that right there is gold. Our digestion it was Hippocrates who said all disease begins in the gut. So when we get our gut going and moving and our digestive juices flowing, that helps us connect to our life force and connect to our bodies.
So what are some of the food groups that we can eat that would activate our cell, like how do I word it? Make us feel that connect with our body, because there are certain foods that give us that vibrancy that wake up our cells, right? That wake up, that trigger us into a better day, that make us feel healthier.
Yeah, that's going to be on an individual basis. I can tell you certain things that certain food groups will do. For example, bitter foods, digestive bitters, help to stimulate the receptors of the vagus nerve that, like I said, stimulate our digestive enzymes and stomach acid and motility. That's direct connection to your life force. So things like arugula, citrus, cranberry, dandelion, all of the foods that have a bitter taste, cruciferous vegetables, those are going to be activating to your digestion to help you break down and absorb all of the nutrients that come into your food. We have to have proper digestion in order to extract the nutrients from anything that we're eating. And then I would say foods that taste really good to you. And I know this is, maybe we can, in another episode, we can talk about habits and self-sabotage and maybe even like cravings and overeating and like that side of things. Because I know that, yeah, that's really, really common, really so common. But eating foods that taste and feel good, it's going to be on an individual basis, but that brings us life when we give ourselves permission to really enjoy, instead of going unconscious while we're just eating and not paying attention, and it's something we think we shouldn't be eating, and so we just eat it really fast, and that takes away our life force when we do that. But when we actually sit and give ourselves the space and give ourselves permission to eat it and enjoy it, that fills us up.
So it's kind of like change your relationship with food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to work on that, Dr. Savannah. I'm actually going to take a journal and I'm going to write down my experiences with the food so I can reflect on that. And because this is so important to me, because I am getting older, and as women get older, our bodies change. I've noticed that, like, I can't burn those calories like I used to. And I take this pretty serious, because a lot of our friends are passing away. I'll be honest with you, as you get older, it happens. And it's because that my generation just wasn't taught to take care of ourselves, we just weren't. And at least the people I know and how I grew up. And this is so important to me. And I know it's important to other people. And like I said, I know it's important to you.
Yes.
That's why you do this. But yeah,
you
have your own journey. If people go to your website, and tell people how they can find you, how they can become a client of yours, how they can join your well-fed. And what is well-fed woman? What is this?
The well-fed woman is this new concept that it's kind of the journey that I'm on. I have a history of restrictive and disordered eating patterns in my past, and I'm a recovering perfectionist and overachiever and overthinker. And the concept of the well-fed woman is filling myself with all the nourishment that I need as a mind, body, soul being. And from that place of fullness is where I can overflow and give to the world. If we are malnourished, whether it's food, water, connection, play, pleasure, sunlight, there are all kinds of nourishment. We need all of that. And we don't all have access to all forms of nourishment, but we all can learn how to nourish ourselves better in different ways, whatever is available to us. So that's my well-fed woman. I'm in my well-fed woman era, deepening into it.
I love that though. I love that.
Yeah.
I love well-fed woman. I love that. It's great marketing. It's, I'm a Capricorn woman, so I'm all about marketing. That's why I'm called the Tattooed Psychic. It's great marketing.
Yeah, you got that down.
Yeah, I got that down.
That's great.
But this is great. And I just want to say thank you because you've taught me a lot about myself today. I mean, I had some serious epiphanies here.
That is my favorite. That's my favorite work to do. The aha moments. That is my bread and butter.
I'm like, holy shit, that's my problem. And that's what I love about spirituality and growing. And, I know I'm a medium and all that, but I'm a great spiritualist more than anything. I believe in spirit and the power of spirit and the power we have to overcome anything and change. And you taught me something today, and I'm so grateful for that. And I love to be taught things. Yeah. And I love this, I'm going to sit on that after this podcast and really be aware of that and talk to my body. Do you think we should talk to our bodies?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to her and say, girl, you got to lose some weight.
Well, there's so much more we can talk about. I'm excited for whatever.
Right. Yes, and so we haven't really talked how often you'll be on, but you can be on as often as you want, once every other week or once a month, but we can talk about that later and whatever you feel. And this is exciting. And I'm going to encourage people out there to this week document what you're putting inside your body and how it makes you feel. I think I'm going to do that. And I think we should take this journey together. And it doesn't matter what your spiritual beliefs are, whatever. This is more about a mind and body connection. And it's spiritual too, because once you get all those things working together, you're amazing. Like I've got the mind and the spirit worked out, but I don't have that body thing.
Yeah.
So I need it all to sink in. And so I encourage all of you to, if you have an issue with your body or you're struggling with your body, to keep tuning in and hearing our stories and getting tips from Dr. Savannah, or I would actually book a session with Dr. Savannah if I were you, so you can get more in depth of your own personal journey. And that works for you personally. Just like I have clients that not everything spirit tells one client to do, another client should do. I have clients that spirit goes, you got to kickbox. And I have other clients that spirit says, oh, you got to journal. So, whatever works for individuals.
Yeah.
This is great, Dr. Savannah. I'm so excited.
Me too. Can I give one more little
absolutely, you can do whatever you want.
That kind of came
up. You're like my queen now, so you can do whatever you want.
You're so sweet. So this one is sneaky, and it's gonna come up. It's probably comes up often and you don't even realize it. I'm talking to everyone, whoever's listening, and it's called shame. And what happens is when we are abusing ourselves, harming ourselves, attacking ourselves in small ways or big, we will then shame ourselves for those behaviors, and it becomes a positive feedback loop of harm. So as much as you can, if you are, let's say, in your case, overeating or eating when you're not hungry, and you're like, like I'm doing this again, pause and see if you can refrain from, or just even notice, oh, I'm shaming myself for this thing. And then I'm shaming myself for shaming myself. Interesting. Bring awareness to those cycles That's how we break them, is just by noticing that they're happening. Sometimes that's all it takes. You don't need to force yourself to fix. A lot of times we just don't even see they're happening. So the next time you feel bad for yourself or about yourself, just notice what you're saying and how you're responding to yourself internally.
That's great you brought that up, because I tell my clients that, but I don't do it all the time. And I have been doing it a lot more in the past few months, how I treat myself, and that's why I finally decided just to get real with how I treat my body. I have to be honest. I hide it all the time. And this year I made a commitment to myself, my spirit, and the universe, that I would be honest with everything and everyone about everything in my life. Because when you're in the public eye, or you're a spiritual person and do the work that I do, many times I've had other healers tell me, don't tell everyone everything, that you're going through, or this and that. I'm like, oh my God. And I try to be that person. I'm like, I can't. I have to tell everyone what I'm going through, because that's how I work. And so this body thing, I finally had to get real with. And it's amazing that I met you and all this is happening, because I really wanted someone that could educate people on the body issue, not just spiritual, but physically.
Yeah, exactly what we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. And how can people find you? What's your website?
Yeah, it's just my full name, SavannahBucant.com. My last name is Bukant. And you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Savannah Bucant. I think
I'll have a link in the comment section for people so they can find you and tap on that. And Dr. Savannah will be back joining us. And I want you all to remember, keep a journal of your food, and keep track of how you're treating yourself and what you're putting inside your body, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Savannah. This is
You're
so
so
great.
welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.